Good day everyone, I'm Rosal Amparaiso from Bsba 2B, and for today's topic I will present about presentation of financial statement. And our topic for financial statement is statement of financial position, recognition of assets and liabilities, and information presented in financial position. Statement of financial position. Concept and nature. Definition of statement of financial position. Ito ang tinatawag din natin na balance sheet, which nakapaloob dito ang assets, liabilities, and equity. Ang assets, liabilities, and equity ay ang the three accounting elements of financial position o balance sheet. Assets. Sa madaling salita, pagmamayari ng isang tao or isang business. Nakapaloob dito ang cash, stock, property, plant or equipment, and other resources na kung saan ito ay controlled by the entity. Ang record ng assets resources ay from the past result ng isang events na kung saan karugtong sa future events benefits ng isang tao o business. Liabilities. In simple words, utang ng isang tao or business sa iba. Ang liabilities ay isang obligation na nagmula sa past event na needed i-settle. An example of a liabilities is loans, accounts payable, mortgage, bonds, warranties, unearned revenue, and accrued expenses or salaries. Equity. Kabuoang kita sa isang business. Ang equity ay ang natitirang kita ng isang business after maideduct ang lahat ng liabilities sa kinita. The basic accounting equation is asset is equal to liabilities plus capital. We should always remember that your balance sheet represents and reflects you or your business to others. The next topic is recognition of assets and liabilities. Ang recognition ay process which starts sa identification ng transaction at events na may kinalaman sa accounting elements o sa assets, liabilities, owner equity, capital, drawings, revenue and expenses. After i-identify, it will be recorded ayon sa tamang ayos nito sa book of accounts or chronologically. Criteria for recognition ng assets and liabilities. Assets ay nare-recognize sa balance sheets once its future economic benefits is strong enough or have a real probable outcome na magpo-flow to the entity. And dapat ang asset has a value na kung saan can be measured surely or reliably. Liabilities, nare-recognize ang liabilities sa balance sheet kapag ito ay probable or malaki ang kasiguraduhan na ang magiging outflow ng resources ay makakatulong sa economic benefits which will result from the settlement of a present obligation. And also, the amount for the settlement must be measured reliably. The next topic is about information to be presented on the face of the statement of financial position. Ito ang mga nakapaloob sa line items sa financial position. Una, property, plant, and equipment. Ito ay tangible assets ng company na commonly have a life about more than 1 year. Tangible asset is yung mga physical na nakikita natin at nahahawakan. Kagaya na lamang ng buildings, machinery, land, office equipment, furniture, and vehicles. Next is investment property. It is land or building which including yung part ng building. It is held to earn rentals or for capital appreciation or both. So, ginagawa nila yung investment property or nag-e-exist ang investment property kapag ibinebenta nila ang investment nila kapag tumaas ang price or value nito from the market para magkaroon sila ng capital gain. Then, the next one is intangible assets. Intangible assets is an asset na hindi physical nakikita or nahawakan, kagaya na lamang ng goodwill, brand recognition, patents, trademarks, and copyrights. The next one is financial assets. Ang financial assets is a liquid assets which gets its value from a contractual right or ownership claims. Kagaya na lamang ng cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and bank deposits. The next one is investment accounted for using the equity method. Is an accounting method para sa recording of investment sa mga kapartner na companies or entities. Ino-note natin dito is, ang equity method is can applied if the company's ownership interest sa other company's value at 20 to 50% of stock in the investee. Tsaka pa lang siya may a-apply once na 20 to 50% ng stock is value to investee. Then the next one is biological asset. Ang biological asset is an asset that are living and measured at fair value minus selling cost. Fair value is the actual value or price. Kagaya na lamang ng trees, plants, animals, or cannabis plants na ginagamit for medicinal purposes. Lahat ng pagmamay-ari ng company na biological assets, kagaya na lamang na nasabi, is needed ilagay or isama sa financial statement position. Then, next one is inventories. Inventory is an asset which about the calculation of cost of goods sold or mga amount ng goods na naibebenta. The next one is trade and other receivables. Trade and other receivables, it is about sa amount owned to a business by its customers following ang sale of goods or services. Ang trade and other receivables is also known as accounts receivables. The next one is cash and cash equivalents. It is the one that reports the value ng company assets that are cash or pwedeng i-convert into cash immediately. Kagaya na lamang ng bank accounts and marketable securities like commercial paper and short-term government bonds. The next one is trade and other payables. Trade and other payables is, this is obligation na kailangan bayaran or indicate sa goods or services na in-acquired sa suppliers. Ang payment ay ma-due within 1 year or less. The next one is provisions. This is amount of an expense na elected by an entity to recognize now. This is used to cover a probable future expenses, kagaya na lamang ng warranties, income tax, liabilities, future litigation fees, or lawyer's fees. Ang provision is para sa mga possible na pagkagastusan ng company na nilalaanan nila ng pondo, which nakalista siya as expenses. The next one is financial liabilities. Sakop ng financial liabilities ang trade and other payables at saka ang provisions. So, ano nga ba ang financial liabilities? Financial liabilities is about sa future sacrifices ng economic benefits that an entity is required to make as a result of its past transaction or kahit na anong activity in the past. In short, about ito sa money or services which own to other party. They use this cash to fund their business. Kumbaga, financial liabilities is mga about sa cash na ginagamit ng business para mapondohan yung business nila. So, papatak siya sa example ng bank loans, finance lease liabilities, and trade. Mga utang na ginagawa ng isang business para mapondohan ang kanilang business. Mas mapa-expand pa ito. The next one is liabilities and assets for current tax. This indicate about sa amount na expected to be paid sa taxation authorities using ang tax rates. The next one is deferred tax liabilities and deferred tax assets. And deferred tax assets is ini-indicates niya future taxable na babayaran ng isang business. Then, ang deferred tax liabilities is about sa indication ng income kapag nag-depreciation ng rate per income tax. So, kapag nag-depreciate ang income tax at mas mataas siya sa depreciation rate per company's output, magkakaroon ng process na kung saan ang company ay magbabayad ng mas mababa na tax para sa current period. Doon nag-a-arise ang deferred tax liabilities. The next one is minority interest. Ito yung portion ng corporation stock or shares na hindi pagmamayari na mismong pinaka-parent o pinaka-nagtayo ng company or business. Less than 50% ito sa kabuang shares. Minority interest is from investors. And the last one is issued capital and reserves attributable to equity holders of the parent. About ito sa equity interest ng owners in a company and yung amount available to absorb identified losses. At yun lamang po ang aking report. Thank you for listening. And our next reporter is Alicia Lara Hernandez.
Good day. My name is Hernandez Alicia Lares from Bsba 2B. And our topic for today is all about statement of financial positions, balance sheet. And my report is all about asset including current asset. What is asset? Asset are resources that an entity owns in order to derive some future benefits. It is anything tangible or intangible that can be used to produce a positive economic value. Assets represent value of ownership that can be converted into cash. Although cash itself is also considered an asset, and the balance sheet of a firm records the monetary value of an asset owned by that firm. And on a balance sheet, assets are listed in categories based on how quickly they expected to be turned into cash. So asset, ito yung mga mahalagang bagay na pag-aari ng isang kumpanya, tao o bansa. Ito ay maaaring tangible na hawakan physically like cash, inventories, vehicle, equipment, buildings, and investment. At ang asset din ay maaaring intangible asset o hindi nahahawakan or incapable of being touched. Include knowledge, brands, goodwills, trademarks, and patents at iba pa. Broadly classified asset into number 1, current asset, and number 2 is the non-current asset. An entity shall present current and non-current asset as separate classification on the face of the balance sheet. However, does not prescribe the order of format in which items are to be presented on the face of the statement of financial positions. It only provides a list of items that are sufficiently different in nature or function to warrant separate preparation. The common practice, however, it is to present current asset before the non-current asset on the face of the statement of financial position. So, pagdating dun sa balance sheet, mas una yung current asset kaysa dun sa non-current asset. Current asset. So, ano nga ba yung current asset? Ito yung mga asset na expected na sa isang kumpanya na mag-convert into cash or gagamitin sa loob ng isang taon ng pagpapatakbo nito. For most businesses, the cut-off for the classification ng isang current asset is 1 year sa balance sheet date. For example, accounts receivable ay current asset because the company will collect them or i-convert na nila into cash within 1 year. Supplies are a current asset because the company expected to use it up in the operation within 1 year. So current asset, an asset shall be classified as current when it is satisfied any of the following criteria. Number one, it is expected to be realized in or is intended for sale or consumption, consumed in entity's normal operating cycle. So sa number one, expected na masosold na agad or masasell na agad ito sa isang normal operating cycle. Number two, it is held primarily for the purpose of being traded. So, purpose talaga ng sa current asset is being traded. So, number three, it is expected to be realized within 12 months after the date of the statement of financial position. So, inaasahan na maisasakatuparan talaga na ma-consume or ma-sell sa loob ng 12 months after the date ng statement of financial position. And number four, it is cash or cash equivalent unless it is restricted from being exchanged or used to settle a liability for at least 12 months after the date of the statement of financial position. Ito ay katumbas ng cash or cash equivalent na maliban na lang kung ito yung restricted from being exchanged or ginamit upang may saayos yung liability at least 12 months after ng date ng statement for financial position. Non-current asset. Assets that do not meet any of the criteria required for current asset are classified as non-current asset. All other assets not classified as non-current asset shall be classified as non-current. When an entity presents current and non-current asset as separate classification of the face of its statement of financial position, it shall not classify the deferred tax assets as current asset. Current asset are the company's long-term investment for which the full value will not be realized or consumed within the accounting year. They are typically highly illiquidity, meaning ito'y asset na to is hindi ganun kabilis i-convert into cash. Uses the term of non-current to include tangible like land, buildings, equipment, etc. and also the intangible like patents, goodwill, trademarks, at iba pa. Compositions of current and non-current asset. Following the requirements of the principle of aggregation, the line items in current asset sections of the statement of financial positions are A. Cash and cash equivalents. B. Financial asset. C. Trade and other receivables. D. Inventories. And E. Prepaid expenses. Likewise, the non-current asset sections of the statement of financial position shall include the following items. Number one, property, plant, and equipment. Number two, long-term investment. Number three, intangible. Number four, other non-current asset. Yung sa compositions of non-current asset is ire-report ng ating next reporter. Compositions of current asset. A. Cash and cash equivalent. Cash. So, ang cash, ano nga ba ang cash? Cash indicates as current asset. Cash ay bills, coins, bank balance, money order, at iba pa. And cash is the most liquid asset a company can possess. And it is any medium of exchange that a bank will accept at place value. Then, ang cash para sa atin, natatanggap mula sa customers, pwede din nating, pwede, pwede ding ang pera inilalabas natin, galing sa atin, pera na galing sa sariling bulsa, sa mga investor, financer na pwedeng gamitin pang patayo ng negosyo. Cash company cash on hand, and cash demand deposit. Basically, the following are included and classified as cash. Number one, money. This include undeposit cash collection in the form of bills and coins. Money may be on hand or cash on hand or in bank or cash in bank. Bills and coins are included as a part of cash and cash equivalent account if they are considered as legal tender and in circulation. So money, this includes yung mga undeposit cash collections gamit ang bills and coins. Sinasabi dito na yung money may be on hand o tinatawag na cash on hand, ito yung hawak na pera na pwede mong gamitin agad-agad. Example, yung example dun sa Shopee kung magkano yung hawak mo. And that will be cash on hand. At pwede din naman ang money ay pwede maging in bank or tinatawag na cash in bank na perang nakadeposito dun sa bangko. Number 2, money substitute. These are cash item in form of customer checks, bank draft, money orders, manager's check, cashier checks, or travel's checks. Money substitute. So, ito nga yung pwedeng i-substitute sa money, like yung mga cheque. Katulad nga ng customer check, mga bank draft, money orders, at iba pa. Money substitute include rin siya sa part ng cash and cash equivalent kapag acceptable for immediate credit or a situation when a check deposited at the Federal Reserve Bank received. Pag sinabing immediate, as in the same day the check was cash. Sa araw na yun, yung check na yun ay na-convert agad-agad siya into cash. Number 3, current working funds. These are funds set aside to meet current needs like petty cash fund, interest fund, dividend fund, and payroll fund. So, ito yung mga pwedeng itabi upang ma-meet yung kasalukuyan na pangangailangan. Example nga yung petty cash, yung mga small amount na pera na pwede mong gamitin sa maliit na mga gastusin. Example na lang, kinulang ka sa bala ng stapler. Then yung example din ng current working funds is yung mga interest fund nga, dividend fund, and payroll fund. Ang working funds are included sa part ng cash and cash equivalent kapag na-maintain nila yung pagpapatakbo ng negosyo. Next is cash equivalent, are short-term liquid investment that are readily convertible to known amount of cash and which are subject to an insignificant risk of change in value. An investment qualifies as a cash equivalent only when it is short in maturity of 3 months or less from the date acquisition. So, yung cash equivalent, short-term liquid investment na ready ma-convert into cash or madaling i-convert into cash. Pero lagi nating tatandaan na ang cash equivalent is must be acquired in 3 months before maturity. Kapag lumagpas ito ng 3 months at hindi na to considered as a cash equivalent. Sa cash equivalent, lagi ang pinaka-importante kung kailangan siyang ini-acquire, which is 3 months before maturity. Cash equivalents, the following are example of cash equivalents. A. 3-month time deposit. B. 3-month money market placement. C. 3-month BSP treasury bills. D. 5-year treasury bill acquired 3 months before maturity date. So, example ko dito sa mga to. Halimbawa, meron tayong excess na 1,000 pesos. Since na-excess ang cash, pwede nating itong i-invest para ma-earn ng interest income. Pwedeng i-deposit sa 3-month time deposit. So, kapag ang 1,000 pesos ko ay dineposit ko sa 3-month time deposit, ibig sabihin, itong 1,000 pesos na ito ay hindi pwedeng galawin o i-withdraw sa bangko for 3 months. Next is miscellaneous topics on cash and cash equivalent. Foreign currency. The amount of cash in foreign currency is valued at the current exchange rate and shown either as a current asset, part of cash and cash equivalent or non-current asset. If the amount of deposit in current foreign currency is not restricted, it is shown as a part of cash and cash equivalent in current asset section of the statement of financial position. Otherwise, if the amount of deposit in foreign currency is material and there is restriction to its use, it's shown as a separate item in the current asset section of financial positions. So, the amount of foreign currency ay nagkakahalaga ng current exchange rate na bahagi din ito ng cash and cash equivalent and o kaya non-current asset. Kapag yung amount ng deposit ng foreign currency is hindi pinaghihigpitan at ipinapakita to sa cash and cash equivalents, in the current asset siya nakalagay sa statement of financial positions. Kung ang halaga naman ng foreign currency is material at ipinapakita ito bilang magkahiwalay na item sa non-current asset section, ito nakalagay sa financial positions o kaya sa balance sheet. Ang cash in foreign currency ay dapat isalin sa lokal na pera or Philippine peso gamit ang exchange rate. Ang deposit ng foreign countries na hindi na ipapailalim sa anumang paghihigpit sa palitan ng foreign currency ay kasama sa cash. Next is bank overdraft. Is the result of the over-issuance of checks against the amount of deposit in bank bringing a credit balance in the cash in bank account. Generally, bank overdraft should not be offset against other bank's account with debit balance unless the amount involved is immaterial or two or several banks' accounts are maintained in the same bank and on the account has credit balance. The bank overdraft is shown as a part of current liability. So, ang bank overdraft, ang normal balance ng cash in bank is debit. Kapag naging credit balance yan yung sinasabing bank overdraft na mas madami or mas malaki yung amount ng total checks na nai-issue versus dun sa total amount ng deposit. Kumbaga, mas madami yung outflow ng cash kaysa sa cash inflow ng cash in bank. Ang bank overdraft is a current liability. May exception rule ng bank overdraft na kapag meron dalawang bank account sa isang entity sa isang bangko at yung isang account ay bank overdraft ay pwede nating i-offset yung bank overdraft na yon sa other bank account with debit balance. So, example dito is bank overdraft, security bank, current asset 1 million pesos, PNB current asset, account 1 is 400,000 pesos, PNB current asset account 2, which is overdraft siya is 50,000. So, ano ba yung cash in? Magkano ba yung cash in bank? Ang bank overdraft generally current liability. Ngayon, ang exception, ang bank overdraft ay pwedeng i-offset kung ang entity na nag-maintain ng dalawang bank account sa isang bangko. Ngayon, ang bank overdraft ay PNB, meron pa ditong PNB na nag-a-amount ng 400,000 pesos na enough naman na ang 400,000 pesos na yun na i-cover yung bank overdraft. Therefore, yung bank overdraft na 50,000 pesos dito is i-offset natin as sa same bank na PNB which is 400,000. Therefore, yung cash in bank na yun is 1 million plus 400,000 minus 50,000 is equal to 1.35 million pesos. Next is post-dated checks. Received by the company as a payment form, the customers of goods and services shall not form part of cash and cash equivalent. This item is considered as trade and other receivables. The entry on the issuance of post-dated checks by the company as payment for the goods or services to supply shall be reversed. The amount of shall be debited and the liability account shall be credited. Yung post-dated checks, ito yung natatanggap ng mga kumpanya bilang pagbabayad ng customers sa goods and services ay hindi dapat part ng cash or cash equivalent kasi yung item na to is considered siya as a trade or other receivables. Since post-dated siya, so ang ibig sabihin ng dated on future date. Ang check or non-negotiable or hindi mo pwedeng ipalit sa bangko when the date is written on the face of the check ay hindi pa ngayon or sa future date pa. Kailangan ibalik sa account payable or payer or accounts receivable o kaya payee yung nag-entry na. The entry on the issuance ng post-dated check ng kampanya bilang bayad sa goods and services sa supplier shall be reverse or baliktad. Yung amount ay dapat i-debit at yung liability account ay dapat i-credit. Next is compensating balance. This amount represents the required balance to be maintained by the borrower with the bank in connection with a loan. If there is no restriction to use or withdrawals, the compensating balance is shown as a part of cash and cash equivalent account. If there is a restriction as to withdrawal and the related loan is short term, the amount is separate shown in the current asset section. However, if the related loan is long term and there is restriction to its use, the amount is shown as a part if the investment in the non-current asset section of the statement of financial position. Compensating balance. So, ito yung minimum amount na dapat mong i-deposito sa bangko. Pag bumaba ka sa compensating balance, magkakaroon ka ng bank charge as long as not restricted yung ginawa mo, pero cash pa rin siya. As a part of the loan agreement or contract, ang entity ay kailangan ma-maintain o mag-iwan ng amount of cash sa checking or saving accounts sa isang bangko. Compensating balance ang tawag sa natirang amount of cash. Example na lang is halimbawa ay ABC company borrows 100,000 from DEF Bank and agrees to maintain 2%, which is 2,000 pesos, yung minimum compensating balance niya in demand deposit account. So, yung 2,000 pesos na yun is tinatawag na compensating balance. Kaya, ang total cash na nautang ng ABC Company kay TF Bank is 98,000 na lamang ito. Next is the financial asset. So, ang financial asset is a liquid asset na kung saan nakukuha ang halaga nito mula sa isang contractual right na ang ibig sabihin is it is a set of right guaranteed whenever people enter to a valid contract with one another. Example is right to be sell a product or services, ganun. Example of financial asset is stock, cash, bonds, mutual bonds, at yung mga nade-deposito sa bangko. Financial instrument disclosure and presentation defines financial asset as a asset that is in the form of cash, equity instrument of other equity. So, ibig sabihin na equity instrument are the documents that acts legal evidence of a proof of ownership right. So, letter C is contractual right na para makareceive ng cash or other financial asset from other entity. Letter D is a contractual that will may or be settled in entities on own equity instrument. An entity instrument is any contract that evidence a residual interest in asset of entity after deducting all the liabilities. Pag naman sa financial instrument is an contract that gives a rise of financial asset of one entity and financial liability or equity instrument of another entity. So, financial asset are Financial instrument are assets that can be traded or modified and settled. Example, yung check, shares, stocks, and etc. Categories of financial asset. Financial assets are broadly classified into financial asset a fair value which include those held for trading. So, kung paano gaganapin ba yung pagtitrade doon sa financial asset na yun. Letter B, those whose designations at initial recognition are at fair value through profits and loss. So, kailangan dito patas yung halaga ng kita or loss niya. Letter C, those investment quoted equity instrument. So, yung mga pamumuhunan na nakakota sa equity instrument. So, financial asset at fair value is classified din as a current asset. Number 2, financial asset at amortized cost, provided the following requirements are satisfied. So, ang ibig sabihin ng amortized cost, ito yung cost is that accumulated portion of the recorded cost of fixed asset that has been charged to expenses. So, letter A, it is intended to hold and collect the contractual cash flow on a specific date. So, ito ay nilalaan upang makolekta yung contractual cash flow. So, letter B, contractual cash is solely for payment of principal and interest on the principal amount outstanding. So, yun nga, yung contractual cash ay para lamang sa pagbabayad ng principal at interest sa principal amount na natitira. So, financial asset at amortized costs are classified as a non-current asset as part of long-term investment line item. Next is trade and other receivables. Loans and receivables are non-derivative financial asset with fixed or determinable payments that are not quoted in an active market. Hence, the value of receivable is not dependent on other transaction or other form of instrument. So, receivables is also referred to as a account receivable. Ito yung mga utang na inutang ng isang kumpanya ng mga customers nito para sa goods and services na nilaan or ginagamit ngunit hindi pa nababayaran. So, receivables are broadly classified into a trade receivables and non-trade receivables. Trade receivables arise from ordinary course of business operation and are shown as a current asset if collectible either with 1 year or within a normal operating cycle of the business, whichever is longer. This accounting guidelines of item presentation is straightforward. Thus, if the trade receivable is collectible beyond 1 year or beyond the normal operating cycle of the business, it is presented as a non-current asset. The common example of trade receivables is account receivables and note receivables. Receivables refers to claims arising from sales of merchandise or service in ordinary course of business. Arise ito kapag ang isang negosyo ay nagbebenta or nagbibigay ng isang service on credit. And it is expected na makolekta in cash in normal operating cycles ng entity or 1 year, whichever is longer, are classified as a non-current asset. Examples ng trade receivables is sa sales merchandise, ang business entity ay sari-sari store. And ang ordinary course of business ng sari-sari store is yung pagtitinda ng mga kanyang mga paninda. Therefore, yung trade receivable nun is yung mga utang ng customer from selling ng mga paninda ng sari-sari store. Next is non-trade receivable. On the other hand, are claims that arise not form of ordinary course of business operations. This type of receivable is shown as a part of the current asset if collectible within 1 year, notwithstanding the normal operating cycle of the business. Non-trade receivable, therefore, relative to the statement presentation disregards the 1 year test. So, Non-trade receivable represent claims from resource from sources other than sales of merchandise or service in ordinary course of business. Sa madaling salita din, ang non-trade receivable din ay kapag may umutang sa kumpanya ng pera na hindi naman related or nauugnay sa pagbibigay ng service or pagbebenta sa isang produkto. Ang na ang trade receivable is basically current asset siya. Ang non-trade receivable kapag collectible within 1 year or collectible within operating cycle of the entity, ang non-trade receivable is classified as current asset. So ang non-trade receivable kapag collectible siya beyond 1 year and classification is non-current asset. So example naman din dito is sa business entity is sari-sari store, binenta niya yung isa sa mga estante or yung sa pinaglalagyan ng mga paninda. Yung receivable arising dun sa pagbebenta ng stante is considered siya as a non-trade receivable kasi hindi naman siya normal operation ng sari-sari store na magbenta ng stante. Non-trade receivables include advance to officers, employees, directors, or shareholders na it is present a cash payment loan made by the officers, employees, directors, or shareholders for a business expenses that are anticipated to be incurred by the officers, etc., employees, and etc. Example, advances to officers, employees might include for travels like gas, parking tickets, meals, membership, and others. B. Advances to affiliates. It is a long-term advances receivable from a party that affiliated with an reporting entity by means of direct and indirect ownership. C. Claims against common carries for damage. Mga paghahabol ng common carries like trucks, buses, taxis damages when the common carry is negligent, the company or the driver is liable for the injuries or damages. Letter D. Advances to suppliers for merchandise are payment made in advance such as down payment for contractual project or services. They are already paid but not yet incurred. Example, APC company is nagbayad ng 50% down payment for the improvement of office and will be debit the advances to suppliers account to increase it and credit cash account for payment made. D. Inventories. Good on hand for sale but remain unsold for sale and consumption. Yung inventory is the term for a good available for sales and raw materials used to produce goods available for sales or goods on hand na sale pero hindi pa nabibili. Ito ay asset. Example, pag merchandising tumutukoy sa paninda, pag manufacturing ng raw materials like sa Angel's Burger, yung ini-inventory kung ilan yung mga patty, tinapay, inililista yung mga item nito. Defines inventories as asset. A. Held for service in the ordinary course of business. So, example dito is the business entity is Ford Motor Company. And the Ford Motor Automated Company producers ng cars, SUV trucks. So, its cars, SUV trucks for sales are considered as inventory of Ford Motors and of company. B. In the process of production for such sales. So, example ko ulit dito is yung Ford Motor Company and Automated Company. Thus, steel, aluminum, plastics, and rubber are currently the production process of the Ford Motor for the production ng SUV, cars, and trucks is considered pa rin as a inventory. C. In the form of materials or supplies to be consumed in the production process or in the rendering of service. So, example nga dito is yung stock of unused steel, aluminum, plastic, and rubber currently in Ford Motors warehouse to use in the production process are considered pa din as an inventory. Next is the cost of inventory, cost of purchase, cost of conversion, other costs directly attributable to the acquisition of finished goods, materials, and services. So, yung tatlong yan, ay yan yung nasa loob ng cost of inventory. Una muna is yung cost of purchase. Una, A, purchase price. Ito yung price na na-indicate dun sa vendor's invoice. B, import duties. Na-incur to kapag yung ang inventory mo ay galing from other country o papunta in the Philippines. Yung import duties, ito yung mga taxes collected on imports by custom authorities. So kapag bumili ka ng inventory from other country, papunta sa Pilipinas, kapag mag-import ka ng inventory, meron kang babayarang import duties. Next is handling and other costs directly attributable to the acquisitions of finished goods, materials, and services. Yung mga inventory kasi, may mga type na inventory na kailangan ng special handling plus procedures. Kumbaga, hindi mo basta-basta ilalagay kung saan-saan yung inventory na yon. Like, yung ibang inventory, kailangan ilagay sa mga room temperature, mga ganun. D. Trade discounts, rebates, and other similar items are deducted in determining the cost purchase. So, trade discount, ito yung discount na na-avail ng buyer kapag bumili ka ng inventory or yung mga bulto-bulto na ma-avail yung trade discount. Rebates, ito naman yung discount given on time of purchase. Example, bumili ka ng inventory tapos binayaran mo agad. Tapos, binigyan ka ni vendor ng discount. Yun yung tinatawag na rebates. A cost of purchase, the cost of good purchase is computed as below. Yun yung pattern kung paano mo gagawin yung pagko-compute nung the cost of good purchase. Next is cost of conversion. Ito naman yung mga manufacturing business, sila yung mismo bumubuo ng product na ibebenta nila sa customer. A is direct labor. Ito yung mga sweldo or compensation ng mga workers na directly na gumagawa ng product. B, production overhead. Ito naman yung mga production costs na related sa pagbuo ng product na hindi direct labor at hindi direct materials. Ang product cost kasi ng manufacturing business, ang composition nga is material, labor, and overhead. Para ma-convert mo yung raw materials sa finished goods, kailangan mong i-convert yung material papunta sa finished goods. Mag-i-incur ka ng conversion ng cost which is composed siya sa direct labor and overhead. Net realizable value of inventories. Net realizable of inventories is equal to estimated selling price minus the estimated cost of completion and estimated cost to sell. Hence, the net realizable value is computed as follow. Yung picture na yan is, yan din yung example kung paano mo i-compute or kung ano mo nga ba yung tamang pag-compute ng net realizable value. Next is determination of cost of inventories. A first in, first out. First in, first out, the FIFO assume that goods first purchased are the first sold. Ibig sabihin, may sistema na sinusunod sa mga unang binili mong product, hindi yung una mong ibebenta na product. May sinusunod kang system or cost flow. Weighted average, ito yung i-multiply natin yung units on hand para ma-derive yung inventory value. The value of the inventories that should appear in the statement of financial position shall be the lower between cost and net realizable value. Cost is determined using first in, first out method or weighted average method. Next is the classes of inventories. The merchandising or trading business entities generally label their inventories as merchandising inventory. The manufacturing concerns label their inventories as a finished good inventory, goods in process inventory, and raw materials inventory. Since the preparation of the statement of financial positions follows the lines items concept, the different classes of inventories are disclosed in the related notes. Classes of inventories are the inventories of trading concern and the inventories of manufacturing concern. The term of merchandising inventory is generally applied to goods held by a trading concern. Ang trading concern, ang ginagawa ni entity is bibili lang siya ng goods, ng inventory, then ipagbebenta na rin. So, ang ibig sabihin nito is parang buy and sell lang talaga siya. 'Pag naman manufacturing, ang entity meaning nito is yung company ay nagko-convert ng product into a new product na ibebenta nila sa kanilang mga customers. Kumbaga, from raw materials, magiging finished goods na ibebenta sa customers. Kapag trading, walang creation na bagong product ang mangyayari. So last is the prepaid expense. The term prepaid expenses is a one-item line classification that includes all prepayments made that are expected to be consumed within 1 year from the date of the statement of financial position. So, yung prepaid expense are future expenses that are paid in advance. Ang prepaid expenses ay asset. Example, bumili ka ng insurance policy para sa isang taon at binayaran mo ito ng 50,000 pesos. Bababa yung cash mo, kaya bababa din yung asset mo. Yung insurance policy na binili mo ay may benepisyo sa business mo isang buong taon. Kapag ang isang bagay na binili mo ay may benepisyo sa iyo sa mga susunod na araw, ito ay dapat na i-record sa asset. Pero kapag naman yung nabili mong asset na ito ay nagamit mo na, doon lamang ito mailalagay sa income statement na bilang isang expenses. Example dito is ng prepaid expenses are prepaid rent, prepaid advertising, at unused supplies. So, ang prepaid rent, ito'y rent na di pa nagagamit or nakapagbayad ka na pero hindi pa nagagamit para siyang advance payment. Ang advance payment para sa pagre-rent ng pag nagamit mo na from prepaid rent, magiging rent expense na siya. Isa pang example is unused supplies. So, yung unused supplies is a current asset na di pa nagagamit. Supplies, example is office supplies like notes, like notebooks, folders na hindi pa nagagamit. Pero once na nagamit mo na ito, magiging supplies expense na siya at use supplies na siya. At yun lamang po ang aking report. Maraming salamat po.
Good day. I'm Rosen L. Monserrat from Bsba 2B. The topic that I will discuss is about composition of non-current assets. So first, pag sinabi nating non-current assets, ito yung mga pagmamayari ng kumpanya na ang benefits ay more than 1 year. At ito yung type of assets na hindi agad natin maiko-convert into cash. It is the company's long-term investments for which the full value will not be realized within the accounting year. And now, malalaman natin kung ano ang composition ng non-current assets. Property, plant, and equipment or PPE is one of the example of a non-current assets. So, PAS 16 defines property, plant, and equipment as tangible items that are held for use in the production or supply of goods or services for rentals to others, or for administrative purposes and expected to be used during more than one period. So, PPE are a company's physical or tangible long-term assets that typically have a life of more than 1 year. And companies recognize non-current assets as a capitalized rather than expense dahil ang non-current assets ay magagamit ng pangmatagalan. And next is the measurement of PPE at recognition. So, an item of PPE should be recognized as an asset if makakapagbigay ito ng benefits na makakatulong sa flow ng entity and the cost of the item can be measured reliably. So, the cost of an item of property, plant, and equipment comprises A. Its purchase price, including import duties and non-refundable purchase taxes after deducting trade discounts and rebates. Next is any cost directly attributable to bringing the asset to the location and condition necessary for it to be capable of operating in the manner intended by management. And letter C, the initial estimate of the cost of dismantling and removing the item and restoring the site on which it is located. To summarize the cost of PPE, lahat ng direktang maiuugnay na nagastos para mapagana yung PPE ay dapat na i-capitalize. Simula sa pagbili ng item, through delivery, installation, and yung sa pag-import. So, next is the measurement of PPE after recognition. So, after initial recognition, the asset should be measured either the cost model or the revaluation model. So, kung ang cost method na ang napiling gamitin for its accounting policy, halimbawa ay to value the machinery, dapat sa lahat ng machineries ay ganong method din ang gagamitin. So, let's move forward to discuss more about the two accounting approach. So, first is the cost model. So, it is the most straightforward accounting approach because a company's fixed assets are carried at their historical cost minus the accumulated depreciation and accumulated impairment losses associated with those assets. This is particularly true for assets such as property or real estate. So, next is the revaluation model. So, the second accounting approach is the revaluation model. So, with the revaluation model, a fixed asset is originally recorded at cost, but the carrying value of the fixed asset can then be increased or decreased depending on the fair market value of the fixed asset, normally once a year. So, itong revaluation method ay ginagamit to describe the true value of long-lived assets na pagmamay-ari ng kumpanya. Ginagawa ito para i-report ang fair market value ng mga long-lived assets. So, pag sinabi nating fair market value, it is the price that two parties are willing to pay for an asset or liability, given the following conditions. So, both parties are well informed about the condition of the asset or liability. Neither party is under undue pressure to buy or sell the item, and there is no time pressure to complete the deal. So, a class of property, plant, and equipment is a grouping of assets of a similar nature and used in an entity's operation. So, the following are examples of separate classes: land, land and buildings, machinery, ships, aircrafts, motor vehicles, furniture and fixtures, and office equipment. So, if yung assets carrying amount ay tumaas as a result of revaluation, the increase shall be credited directly to equity under the heading of revaluation surplus. So, sa kabilang banda, yung pag-increase ay kailangan natin i-recognize in profit or loss to the extent that it reverses a revaluation decrease of the same asset previously recognized in profit or loss. So, pag naman yung asset carrying amount ay bumaba as a result of revaluation, the decrease shall be recognized in profit or loss. However, The decrease shall be debited to equity under the heading of revaluation surplus, to the extent of any credit balance existing in the revaluation surplus with respect to the assets. So, this is how revaluation. So, the asset is to be revalued to fair value. An upward revaluation recognized in OCI. So, yung OCI is other comprehensive income. It includes revenues, expenses, gains, and losses that have yet to be realized and are excluded from net income on an income statement. So, a downward revaluation recognized in profit or loss. So, next is long-term investments. Long-term investments are assets held by an entity intended to accumulate wealth resources by means of capital distribution in the form of royalties, interest, dividends, rentals, capital appreciation, or other benefits obtained through trading relationships with the intention of holding the investments for more than 1 year. So, in business, hindi nila pinapatulog yung pera. And that's why they are also investing in long-term investments, gaya nga ng royalties, interest, dividends, rentals, and etc. So, the examples of long-term investments are sinking fund, plant expansion fund, investment in bonds, investments in stocks, cash surrender value of life insurance, investment in subsidiary, investment property, and investment in joint control entity. So, ang kagandahan nga din ng mga long-term investment ay maaaring madoble yung ininvest natin na pera, pero dapat din natin tandaan na may risk din in investing in long-term investments. Kaya dapat we are well knowledge when it comes to investments. So, that's all. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Erica Picabanero and my topic is intangible and other non-current assets. Intangibles. Intangibles defined as identifiable non-monetary asset without physical substance. So, simple lang yung pinaka-meaning ng intangibles. Kapag sinabi nating identifiable, meaning kaya mong malaman kung asan siya at kaya mong ituro. Kapag naman sinabing non-monetary asset, meaning naman ito ay hindi siya cash or yung entity ay walang contractual rights to receive cash. Yung pinakang meaning naman ng intangible ay without physical substance. Kapag naman sinabing without physical substance, meaning hindi mo siya nakikita, nahahawakan o naaamoy pero alam mong meron siya. Wala siyang physical substance pero alam mong meron. Intangible, di ba ibig sabihin ng intangible ay hindi nga nahahawakan? An asset meets the identifiability criterion in the definition of intangible asset when it A. is separable, that is capable of being separated or divided from the entity and sold, transferred, licensed, rent, or exchanged either individual or together with a related contract asset or liability. Kapag sinabi kasing identifiable, you can separate that. It is separable in a sense na kapag kaya mong iwalay, therefore, napipinpoint mo kung alin siya. Na kapag kaya mong iwalay, magagamit mo siya as it. Kasi nahihiwalay mo nga eh. Pwede mo siyang parentahan, paupahan sa iba. It is rendered or sold, and it also be licensed and transferred to another kasi alam mo na kung alin siya at kaya mo siyang identify. Nag-a-arise o malalaman mo kung paano na-identify kasi alam mong meron. Kasi maaaring meron ng isang asset ng contractual rights o sinasabing legal rights. Kunwari, naparehistro mo na siya. Dahil doon, nagkaroon siya ng pangalan. Magagamit mo na siya. Na-identify mo na rin siya kasi may pangalan na siya. Dahil doon, kapag naparehistro mo na siya, meron na siyang legal rights or contract. B. Arises from contractual or legal rights regardless of whether those rights are transferable or separable from the entity or from the other rights of obligation. Sinasabi lang dito na may control. You can enjoy the asset, meaning yung kanyang benefit ay ikaw lang ang magkakaroon. Pwede mong pigilan yung ibang tao na mag-enjoy dun sa benefit na meron ka. Again, you can enjoy the benefit and you can prevent other from enjoying the same. Kaya nga nire-register mo because you have the rights. You have the rights. Sabi ng batas, ikaw lang ang pwedeng mag-enjoy ng benefit na yon. Recognition of intangibles. An intangible asset shall be recognized if and only if it is probable that the expected future economic benefit that are attributable to the asset will flow to the entity, and B. The cost of each asset can be measured reliably. Nakapokus lang to sa economic benefit. Diba, alam naman natin na asset yan dahil nagbibigay siya sa atin ng benefit. Dahil baka ibebenta natin to someday. Dahil dyan may future benefit. Kung hindi man natin mabebenta para magka-income, maaari din itong maging cost. Measurement of intangible asset. How to measure intangible asset? First, initially, ito yung moment na nagkaroon ka. And then, subsequently, as the time goes by, katulad ng PPE, katulad ng wasting asset, subsequently, it can be measured at cost model and revaluation model. Cost model, we measure the intangible asset at cost. Ibig sabihin, depende sa ways on how the entity acquired the specific intangible asset. Pipili ang isang entity kung alin man model. Pag sinabing cost model, ito yung paggastos. Pag revaluation model naman, ito naman yung pagsusuri. The key difference between the cost model and the revaluation model is that the value of non-current assets are valued at price spent to acquire the asset under the cost model, while assets are shown at fair value, an estimated of the market value under the revaluation model. So, ito naman yung mga example ng identifiable intangible asset. Copyright. Copyright is an exclusive right granted by the government to an author, composer, or artist, enabling the guarantee to publish, sell, or other benefit from the literary, musical, or artistic work. Pag sinabi nating copyright, ito naman yung mga natatanging karapatan na pinagkaloob ng gobyerno sa isang author kasi meron siyang nalikha tungkol sa literature or meron siyang nalikha na tula, kwento, yun. The next one is patent. A patent is an exclusive right guaranteed by the government to an inventor, enabling him or her to control the manufacture, sale, or other use of invention for a specific period of time. Pag sinabi nating patent, isa siyang right, isa siyang karapatan, actually, exclusive right, meaning ikaw lamang ang maaaring gumamit nun, na binibigay ng government sa isang inventor. By the way, pag sinabi nating inventor, sila yung gumagawa, nagdi-discover, o kauna-unahang nakakaisip. Karapatan ito para mag-prevent sa ibang tao o manufacture, sale, or use of invention for specific of time. The next one is license and franchises. Franchise is an authorization granted by a government or company to an individual or group enabling them to carry out the specified commercial activities. Kapag sinabing franchise, ito yung pagpayag na isang commercial activities na nagmula sa government or company to individual. May dalawang tao sa franchise. Ito yung una, yung franchisor. Pag sinabing franchisor, ito yung private company or government. Kapag sinabi namang franchisee, ito naman yung tumanggap ng authorization. Ang tanong, sino ang magre-record ng account title na franchise? Ang magre-record ng account title ng franchise ay ang franchisee kasi siya yung nag-acquired, nagbayad nung pinaka mismong franchise. Ang isa namang example ng unidentifiable intangible asset ay goodwill. Kapag sinabi nating goodwill, ito yung the establish of reputation of the business regarded as the quantifiable asset. Example, as represented by the excess of the price paid at takeover for a company and its fair value. Other non-current asset. This is the line item that represent the non-current asset not falling under the classification of property, plant, and equipment, and long-term investment or intangibles. Example of other non-current asset are abandoned property, long-term refundable deposit, or long-term advances to the employees of officer. Kapag sinabi natin ng current asset, ito yung mga long-term asset na di madali o hindi basta-basta nako-convert sa cash, like real estate, equipment, investment of the company. Ang pinakamagandang example ng current asset ay ang mga katulad nito, property, plant and equipment, mga tangible asset, intangible asset. Magandang mga example ng mga non-current asset ay ang mga abandoned na property, yung mga hindi na nababayaran, mga long-term deposit na refundable, tsaka yung mga advances na mga binabayad ng mga officers sa mga employee nila. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Before I start my discussion about my topic, which is liabilities, I just want first to introduce myself. I'm Sherman T. Consignado from Bsba 2B. Liabilities. A liability is a present obligation of the entity arising from past events, the settlement of which is expected to result in an outflow from the entity of resources embodying economic benefits. So when we said liabilities, it is some money owned to buy an assets tulad ng loans that used to purchase new equipments and tools or other assets na makakatulong to make a business grow. Also, it can be source of a company or business assets and as a claim against company's assets. Ang mga examples ng liabilities na madalas nating nakikita sa statement of financial position o yung tinatawag nating balance sheet ay accounts payable. When we said accounts payable, ito yung mga pinopurchase ng isang business or company on credit. That's why it results to accounts payable. Ang iba pang examples ng liabilities ay notes payable, interest payable, and salaries payable. Characteristics of liabilities. It is a present obligation of an entity and not a future commitment. When we said present obligation, it is based on the evidence available, and also its existence at the balance sheet date is considered probable. It is legally enforceable as a consequence of a binding contract or statutory requirements or when the asset is delivered. So merong agreement between two parties and also nandun yung consideration and yung intention ng both parties to create legal relations. It arises from business practices, customs, and a desire to maintain good business relations or act in an equitable manner. Nagkakaroon ng liabilities ang isang business when they want to purchase new assets, like for example nga, yung mga tools or vehicles na malaki ang maitutulong sa isang business to operate and grow. But too much liabilities could cause financial hardship dahil yung mga kikitain mo is ang mangyayari ay pambayad lang sa mga liabilities mo and maaaring humantong sa pagkalugi at pagbagsak ng isang business. The settlement of the obligation is usually involves the giving up of entities' resources. Kapag dumating yung time na hindi na makabayad ang isang business sa hiniram niya, dito nangyayari yung aregluhan na kadalasan humahantong sa pagbibigay ng ibang resources in exchange dun sa inutang nila. Modes of settings liabilities. So it includes payment of cash, transfer of other assets, provision of services, replacement of another obligation, conversion of the obligation to equity, or creditor waiving for forfeiting its rights. So ito yung mga way on how they can settle their present obligations. Classification of liabilities. It is expected to be settled in the entity's normal operating cycle. So normally, current liabilities or yung mga short-term financial obligations that are due within 1 year or within a normal operating cycle, and dito napapasok yung cash conversion cycle, like converting its investment in inventory and other resources into cash flows from sales. It is held primarily for the purpose of being traded. It is due to be settled within 12 months after the balance sheet date. So once na merong liabilities ang isang business, so the business owners have an obligation to pay the liabilities within 12 months after the reporting period. The entity does not have an unconditional right to deeper settlement of the liability for at least 12 months after the balance sheet date. So dun sa 12 months na yun, kinakailangan na makapagbayad ang isang business or ang isang company to its liabilities. Presentation of liabilities. Current liabilities. It includes trade and other payable, provisions, liabilities per current tax, current portion of non-current financial liabilities, and short-term loans. So current liabilities is a short-term liabilities. So it is a financial responsibilities that will be paid back within a year. And non-current liabilities. It includes long-term borrowings, deferred tax liability, finance lease liability, and long-term deferred revenue. So sa non-current liabilities, ito yung tinatawag din nating long-term liabilities. It is also a financial responsibilities that will be paid back more than a year, tulad ng mga mortgage and ng mga business loans.
Good day, classmates and teacher. I am Frederick Borseño, the reporter of Statement of Financial Position, Balance Sheet. The assigned topic given to me is all about the equity. Equity. The framework defines equity as the residual in the asset of the entity after deducting all its liabilities. So, yung equity, dito makikita ang mga natitirang entity pagtapos i-less ang mga liabilities. So, ito yung basic accounting equation. Equity equals asset minus liabilities. Dito yung pagle-less ng mga nagastos. Dito makikita natin yung mga natitirang entity. So, ayun yung equity in balance sheet. Yung mga natitirang entity na nileles, dito siya makikita. Next naman is yung presentation. Yung presentation of equity. An entity shall disclose the following either on the face of the statement of financial position or in the notes. So dito makikita natin kung paano ma-disclose at kung paano naleles yung mga liabilities. So number 1, for each class of share capital. A. The number of shares authorized. B. The number of shares issued and fully paid and issued but not fully paid. C. par value share or that the share have no par value. D. A reconciliation of the number of shares outstanding at the beginning and at the end of the period. E. The right preferences and restriction attaching to that class, including restriction on the distribution of dividends and the repayment of capital. F. Shares in the entity held by the entity or by its subsidiaries or associates, and shares reserved for issue under options and contracts for the sale of shares, including the terms amount. Number 2. A description of the nature and purpose of each reserve within equity. The reserve within the equity includes the following items: share premium, appropriation reserve, revaluation surplus reserve, foreign currency translation reserve. Yung mga binasa ko yan, sa illustration 3.5 ko sila i-explain kasi magkakoconnect sila. Parang nasa pinakang illustration yung explanation nilang lahat. Makikita natin dun na dun yung lahat. So, let's proceed. Illustration 3.5, Pro forma of the stockholders equity section. Diyan sa illustration 3.5, pinapakita yung funds contribution by shareholders equity, retained earning, reserve representing appropriation for retained earning, and reserve representing capital maintenance adjustment. So, di ba nga, nakalagay na entity shall disclose in face of SFP or sa notes. So, dyan sa presentation 1, ayan yung pinakang presentation ng shareholders equity sa statement of financial position. Pinag-add lang siya para makuha yung shareholder equity na 22,100,000. This is yung presentation 2. Diyan sa presentation 2, pinapakita naman dyan yung disclosing sa notes, kung paano na-disclose. Yung sa presentation 1 din, ayan, sa ano din yan, disclosing sa notes. Notes din. So, yan. So, di ba nga nakalagay naman na the reserve within the equity includes share premium. Ayan o, share premium 2 million. Appropriate reserve, appropriate 4 million. Evaluation surplus reserve, foreign currency translation reserve, ayan, retained earning appropriated for contingency 2 million. So, add lang yung tatlong yan para makuha yung total reserve na 8 million. Yung last na presentation is yun sa asset, tapos yung liabilities and stockholders equity. So, di ba, sabi residual. Yun yung mga natira kasi di ba sinabi na ay yung tira kapag niles yung liab sa asset. Kaya ayan, kapag niles mo yung 8,550,000 na nasa total non-current liabilities, tapos yung 30,650,000 na nasa liabilities and stockholders equity. Kapag niles mo yun, yung magiging total niya is 22,100,000. Ayun na yung pinakang shareholders equity niya, yung pinakang total. So, ayun, ano lang siya, minus lang. Diba sabi sa equation, equity equals asset minus liabilities. So, ganun lang din yung pattern niya dun sa pinakang equity sa balance sheet. Yun lang. Thank you.